Thousands of years ago, practitioners in ancient India mapped out 7 energy centers running along the spine. They called these centers chakras, and they spent centuries describing their locations, their functions, and exactly what broke down when each one fell out of balance. They managed to do all of this without MRI machines, without endocrinology textbooks, and without any of the tools you would consider basic for understanding the human body. Then, modern anatomy came along and mapped 7 major hormone-producing glands along that same vertical axis. These glands share the same locations and the same life functions as the chakras, yet nobody coordinated this overlap. Nobody sat down with a yoga text and a biology manual to make them match up on purpose. So, what do you do with a connection like that? You have to wonder if it is just a massive coincidence or if ancient observers, by paying close attention to the body for centuries, actually stumbled onto something real. That is the question this video is about. We are not looking at belief or spirituality, but rather what the overlap actually looks like when you put both maps side by side. The lower 3, survival, sex, and power, start at the bottom with the root chakra, known as Muladhara, which sits at the base of the spine. Traditional texts say this center governs territory, safety, and basic survival, creating that feeling of being grounded, or the panic you feel when you are not. Now look at what is sitting nearby in the body. Because the adrenal glands are perched just above the kidneys and are responsible for flooding your system with cortisol and adrenaline the moment your brain registers a threat. Fight or flight runs through them. So every time you feel unsafe, financially, physically, or socially, the adrenals act as the biological mechanism behind that response. The ancient description and the modern function are pointing at the same thing. Move up to the sacral chakra, or Swadhisthana, which sits in the lower abdomen. The traditional domain here covers sexuality, reproduction, and creative drive. The gonads, meaning the ovaries and testes, live in that same region and produce estrogen and testosterone, which are the hormones that govern sexual function, fertility, mood, and motivation. The pelvic plexus is a real network of autonomic nerves in that area that carries signals directly to those glands. So the geography and the function line up almost exactly with what the ancient texts described. Then you have the solar plexus chakra Manipura sitting right at the navel. Traditional associations for this center include personal power, digestion, metabolism, and the sense of internal fire. The pancreas sits right there and does exactly that job biologically, as it regulates blood sugar through insulin and controls how much energy your body has available at any given moment. The celiac plexus is the largest autonomic nerve network in the abdomen, and it surrounds that region to innervate the pancreas, adrenals, stomach, and intestines all at once. When people talk about having gut feelings or losing their fire, there is a real biological cluster underneath that language. What ties all 3 together is how chronic stress hits each of them in a specific sequence. When the stress response stays on, which is basically the default setting for modern life, the adrenals overproduce cortisol while gonadal hormones get suppressed because the body prioritizes survival over reproduction. Blood sugar regulation goes sideways because cortisol raises glucose levels, which means the lower chakras read almost like a stress damage map when you lay them over what we know about the HPA axis. To be straight with you, these are proposed correlations. No controlled study has proven a causal chain between chakra states and gland function yet, but the spatial overlap is specific, and the functional descriptions are close enough that dismissing it completely requires ignoring a lot of detail. The middle two, protection and expression. The heart chakra, known as anahata, sits right in the center of your chest. Traditional texts describe this spot as the home of love and protection, but they also link it to the immune defense of the self. If you look at the biology, the thymus gland lives in that exact same space in the upper chest, and its primary job is to train your immune cells by teaching the body's defenses how to tell the difference between you and a threat. This gland is most active while you are a child, which lines up perfectly with the heart chakra's ancient association with early emotional bonds and how we first learn to feel safe with our families. This connection to your immunity goes even deeper than a single gland. The autonomic nervous system links the functions of your heart region to immune regulation through a field researchers call psychoneuroimmunology. When chronic stress throws your nervous system out of balance and pushes you into a state of constant fight or flight, your immune function starts to degrade. While that pathway is indirect, the link is well documented and very real, meaning the idea of the heart chakra as a center for emotional and immune protection isn't just poetic language, because it maps onto a biological system that actually functions that way. Moving up to the throat, we find the Vishuddha chakra, which maps directly to the thyroid gland. This gland sits in your neck and controls your metabolism, your energy levels, and your physical development across your entire body. The traditional meaning here is all about self-expression, communication, and the process of learning. Running right through this same narrow corridor is the vagus nerve, which is the longest cranial nerve in your body and acts as a massive data cable connecting your brain to your heart, lungs, and gut. Because it passes right by the thyroid on its way down, the throat serves as a major junction point for some of the most important wiring in your entire physical frame. What makes this clinically interesting is how thyroid dysfunction often shows up in patients. Whether the gland is overactive or underactive, people frequently struggle with fatigue, difficulty communicating, and a sense of emotional blunting. Doctors obviously don't use chakra terms when they diagnose these issues, but the functional picture of a disrupted throat region affecting your energy, your voice, and your mood matches the traditional descriptions more than most people realize. It is important to be clear that no clinical trials have proven that throat chakra exercises can actually change your thyroid hormone levels. The link we are looking at is strictly anatomical and correlational. However, just because something is correlational doesn't mean it is meaningless, especially when the physical anatomy keeps lining up with the ancient map so consistently. The upper two command and consciousness. The lower five chakras all have relatively clean matches with specific glands, locations, and biological hardware. Once you get to the top two, the map starts to get a bit stranger, but this is also where things get much more interesting. The third eye chakra, or ajna, is traditionally located between your eyebrows and is described as the command center for your perception, intuition, and the regulation of your awareness. In the original Sanskrit, the name ajna literally translates to command, which is a fascinating detail when you look at what sits in that specific region of the brain. The hypothalamus lives right there, and modern medicine calls it the command center of the body because it regulates your temperature, hunger, sleep, and your entire hormonal output. The fact that the ancient name and the modern medical nickname are identical is not a subtle coincidence. Tucked just behind that area is the pineal gland, which produces melatonin to control your circadian rhythm and tell your body when it is time to wake up or go to sleep. Ancient traditions across many different cultures called this tiny structure the seat of inner vision. The pineal gland is anatomically unusual because it is one of the only brain structures that sits outside the blood-brain barrier, and it responds directly to light signals that travel through your eyes. It is essentially a light-sensing organ buried deep inside your skull. So whether you believe the metaphysical claims or not, the traditions that called it a third eye were actually describing a very strange piece of biology. Finally, we have the crown chakra, Sahasrara, which sits at the very top of the head. This is traditionally described as the center of higher consciousness and the point where the individual connects to something larger than themselves. The pituitary gland sits at the base of the brain, just above the roof of your mouth, and it is widely known as the master gland because it sends out the hormonal signals that regulate every other gland in your body. Your thyroid, your adrenals, and your reproductive organs all take their marching orders from the pituitary. If you view the chakra system as a hierarchy, with the crown at the top, placing it over the gland that controls every other gland in the map, is a very consistent way to organize the system. The honest caveat here is that this specific section carries the most theoretical weight of the entire map. We don't have empirical studies that directly connect crown chakra states to the output of the pituitary gland. What we can say is that the positional logic holds up, and it follows the same pattern as every other pairing we have looked at so far. You have 7 energy centers and 7 hormone glands sitting in the exact same spots, and they've been linked to the same life functions for thousands of years. While that isn't hard proof, the pattern is way too specific to ignore. So you should subscribe to Neural Antiquity for more videos where we test ancient ideas against modern science.